Hands up. How many of you knew you could do that? 'Cause I didn't. I'm so happy you guys liked the last video. Before we dive into this one, I should say that while I may have misinterpreted some details, I feel the bad memory video has a lot of potential. Likewise, this video is a mishmash of ideas that I have varying levels of confidence in, but the more I analyzed each idea, the more they ended up adding to each other. So prepare yourself, I could barely wait to post this for you. Let's kick it off with one of our stronger theories that I have to discuss. A few people online have theorized we'll have different soul modes for each of the secret boss fights, starting with red, then seemingly in reverse flowy fight order since it follows with yellow. We only have 2 secret bosses so far, but I'd like to add to this theory by focusing on these soul traits and their items for the majority of this video. Let's see what we have to work with here. In Chapter 1, we descend a flight of stairs into the dungeon beneath the castle to fight Jevil. The player is red, and Jevil attacks with red scythes. And what is a scythe but a knife on a stick? It's even called Devil's Knife. There don't seem to be any bandages or friendship lockets around, so let's just focus on the weapons for this segment. If the flowy fight order is relevant, only the offensive items appear in that fight, not the defense items. But I'll focus on the defense items in a later segment. There are other parallels to draw between Jevil and the Red Soul, as well as the player, like seeing himself as a player in a game, being the only free one, and also themes around sleep and loneliness. In Chapter 2, we descend a flight of stairs into the basement beneath the mansion to fight Spamton Neo with a yellow soul. Spamton fires a gun at the player, and again, the defense item is nowhere in sight. But the gun from Undertale is found in a dumpster. I didn't think Spamton had much to do with justice at first, but vengeance makes sense. In his eyes, taking over the Queen's castle after being kicked out would absolutely be justified in his eyes, as well as his grudge against several other characters. You might be wondering why I care if both secret bosses are beneath a castle after a long flight of stairs. Now where, oh where, have we seen this before? 7 chapters? 7 souls. It might be a coincidence, but it sure is lining up so far. If it is the reverse flowy fight order, then green would be next. If Chapter 3's possible television boss incorporates a frying pan somehow, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with another killer cooking show. I honestly feel like Toby is teasing us by naming this new song Green Room, though. Not to mention, if Metaton's art of Neo was repurposed for Spamton, and Metaton's battle in Undertale uses the Yellow Soul mode, then it's even more suspect that Toriel calls the police at the end of Chapter 2, because Officer Undyne just might show up. And what magic did she use in Undertale? That said, if any character in Deltarune represents the green soul of kindness, it's definitely Rouse. No argument about it. He's green, he bakes, he's got a literal kindness stat. We know Chris opened a dark fountain in their home, so we may find out more about Rouse and Asriel's true nature in the near future. People speculate about the flowers in the trash, sure, but don't forget who Flowey really used to be. The core was bound to draw the attention of Deltarune theorists, being created by Gaster and possibly being the creation he fell into. There's symbols similar to the Deltarune found here too, and people have found that these objects are called darkness totems in the files. What drew my attention, however, is this asset created by an artist named Kenji. The commentary in Undertale's official art book says, "If I had to pick, I think my favorite bit from this tile set are the little CMYK tubes I made." Now, CMYK are color cartridges used for printers, and stand for cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K, according to the internet, stands for key, meaning black. Interestingly enough, these colors align with the battle icons of our 3 main lighteners in Deltarune, Chris, Susie, and Noelle respectively. These icons seem to be picked for style rather than being based off any soul color we've discussed so far. Susie is purple in the light world, which is close enough to magenta in her dark world form. Noelle has blonde hair in both worlds, so yellow works just fine. And Chris is blue to match their skin that inverted from the yellow color it had in the light world. These 3 characters also have special dialogue when trying to name the player one of these names at the start of Deltarune. Not even Rouse gets this treatment. When cyan, magenta, and yellow pigments are combined, they make black. so I wonder if this plays some significance in Deltarune's story. For the core specifically, I wonder if it's anything like a real printer. If it runs out of color, it can only print in black and white. And what do we know that is black and white? Rousey's Castle Town does look like it's made of paper since it's reflecting the supply closet in the light world. I wonder if the locked room next to the closet has a dusty printer inside. It would give an explanation for the black goo everywhere. Printer ink. At first I considered that since there are colorful versions and goner versions of characters, that they could have been scanned and printed out, but I don't think that's the case since we see Clam Girl transform right in front of us. Another issue with this theory is that the art book states that Kenji wasn't given any context for the story to make Hotlands assets, so there might not have been any context for the core either. The core is also stated to be a power source, so unless it has more than one purpose, this theory is just a fun idea at best. There's definitely something up with the core though. Here's a theory I've been thinking out for a long time, but have only now considered its significance. The monsters in the ruins represent the 6 souls, and this goes for their hard mode counterparts too. Let's start with the obvious ones. Vegetoid and Parsnip can heal you like the kindness items do every turn, and Vegetoid says eat your greens. Simple enough, right? Whimsung and Whimsalot have themes of courage in their battle dialogue, and the endgame text for Whimsung is getting braver and braver every day. Whimsung in particular is a cowardly enemy that will flee the fight if you try to console it, and can only hurt you if you're moving, a contrast to its later form that represents bravery. Astigmatism is an eye condition, and Loox is, well, Loox. Perseverance's items include a pair of glasses, so that's not hard to connect. There are also themes of bullying here, but we'll save that point for later. I think Moldsmal, Moldessa, and Moldbig could represent integrity. Moldsmal's yellow text at the end says, backup dancer, which lines up with Integrity's ballet outfit. And we can argue that rearranging Moldessa's face helps it feel like its true self. Moldbig's true nature is revealed once approached, but it also waits motionless like the patient's soul might, so this one's a little bit murky. As much as I wanted to connect the 6 ruins monsters to the 6 souls, Migosp and Migosp don't fit justice very well. I even tried connecting them to Spamton as a workaround, since Migosp has religious themes, a desire for an audience, and laughs like a puppet from Homestuck. But that was a dead end because Migosp's clown theme's more easily tied with Jevil. That's when I realized, themes of loneliness, being part of a hive mind, only being able to be yourself when you're alone. Migosp and Migosp don't represent the yellow soul, but the red soul. But then, what's left for justice? The Dummy. The Dummy is a great fit, since its cousin is out for revenge. I suppose Mad Dummy or Mad Mew Mew could be a stand-in for a hard mode version, and we even have a connection with Spamton and Mannequins. Only one pair of monsters is left to tie to the last soul trait, and that's every ruins encounter accounted for, excluding Toriel and Flowey since they're main characters, as well as Napstablook since they're excluded from everything. That can only leave us with Froggit and Final Froggit. Final Froggit has a floating crown over its head, which ties in with the patient's golf description of dethroning the enemy with a sharp attack. The ribbon makes the wearer cute, and in doing so, discourages enemies from hitting them too hard. Similar enough, Final Froggit's attack is lowered when you compliment it. One Froggit even asks that the player be patient enough to not skip through its dialogue. It all sounds pretty cut and dry, right? But Froggit is weirder than the other ruins monsters. It's the first random monster we encounter in battle, and the last in Asgore's castle telling us that we're going to be free. It even appears at the beginning of Deltarune. So what? It's just the mascot for random encounter monsters, right? It asks the players to be merciful and doesn't know why it's there at the beginning, but its final form knows exactly why it's there in the core. It's easy to say that the Froggit dialogue reflects how the player is going to act in the game, merciful or murderous, and is decided by that point in the game whether they spare their enemies or not. And something bothers me about that smiling figure where its belly might be, and the Mystify act causing Final Froggit to recognize that there is more to learn from this world, rather than erasing it? But wait, the player absolutely has a red soul, not a patient soul like we're trying to tie Froggit to. Well, here's the thing. The patient soul is weird just like the Froggit is, This is the main reason I wanted to make this video, actually. But before we discuss patience, let's get determination cleared up first. Let's look into our main characters of determination, since they almost seem like an amalgamation of a protagonist. We don't know for sure what's up with them yet, but heck, I'll do my best. It's undoubtable that some remnant of Chara is attached to Frisk throughout all of Undertale. It's especially obvious in the violent route, but Chara's memories appear when Frisk is unconscious in every route. Then there's the issue of Chara potentially being the second speaker in Deltarune's opening, since the Japanese format lines up. Deltarune theorist Jaru pointed out in another video that this could still be just Gaster speaking more dramatically, since the code seems to indicate it's one of Gaster's typers. But it's so similar to Chara's speech patterns at the end of the Genocide route, it's uncanny. I'm curious to see if the Undertale Legends of Localization has anything to say about Chara's scene, so if I can read it before I finish this video, I'll let you know. Who knows, maybe Chara and Gaster are more connected than we thought. We know Chara died before their soul was combined with Asriel's, and then Asriel turned to dust upon arriving back in the underground. Asriel's soul would have faded to dust, but what of Chara's? At the end of the bad route, it's apparent that Chara does not have their soul. Did it fade with Asriel's? It's almost like Chara retained some monster-like qualities and became a ghost. We see other ghosts in Undertale try to take control of vessels, and Toriel buried Chara under the flowers that Frisk fell on. Chara could theoretically possess Frisk, but not take full control. Maybe just to share some memories every now and then. Unless Chara did what Mad Dummy did and endured such a strong emotion that they became fully corporeal. An emotion brought on by doing something like killing your own brother. But there's still the question of why this generator has a red heart on it. And I swear that's a creepy face too. And the screens turn to red smiling faces at the end. But all it is a generator for the lights and elevator in the True Lab. The True Lab where the former royal scientist Dr. Gaster used to work. If he was still alive when Chara died, would he have something to do with this soul being there? A remnant of Chara existed within Frisk without their soul, like Asriel does in a flower. But even if Gaster used Chara's soul in a generator for some reason, he's gone. Alphys, after doing extensive research on souls and determination, would absolutely notice a human soul being kept in the lab. So either it's only a remnant of Chara's soul, symbolic and not connected to Chara at all, or Alphys secretly grew to believe that getting to the surface would only result in the humans demolishing monster kind once again, and didn't tell Asgore his deceased child's soul was in the basement for who knows how long. Alphys is known for lying and keeping secrets, often trying to spare the feelings of others, so if something's going on with the generator, she probably wouldn't tell us directly. We know there's an elevator in the True Lab that leads to Asgore's castle, but it's unclear if the True Lab generator powers anything besides the elevators. You would think a generator with a soul symbol on it might be more important than just that, right? But as far as I searched, the NPCs don't mention an underground-wide power outage. Come to think of it, why did the power go out in the True Lab anyway? Wouldn't you want your most important lab connected to the best power source in the underground? If Chara's purpose for reincarnation was power, it's a bit on the nose, but a generator would be a befitting vessel. Maybe it's just a heart-shaped symbol, but that's highly suspect from all these unanswered questions. I can't say for sure, but if Gaster and Chara are connected across time and space, then maybe Chara's dialect being similar to Gaster's isn't just a coincidence. After all, if Chara is the demon that comes when you call its name, who would a demon serve rather than the man who is so closely associated with the devil? One was seemingly erased from the world, and one has the ability to erase the world, because we are not the ones in control in that route. But if this soul holds someone's will and compassion, whose is it? We can see Chris's compassion while defending Susie in battle, but they can't play the piano while the player is in control. That leads into our next segment. Plenty of people wonder if Asriel is alive, judging from Chris's reactions when he's mentioned. If he isn't, Chris seems to know something about it, and possibly had a part in his downfall. So then, why be compassionate to Susie and not their brother? They clearly cared about him. Chances are, whatever happened was an accident. They regret their actions, and might even refuse to gain LV on their own. I'm gonna stop myself there. I've rewritten this section the most because I keep asking more questions without answers. Maybe the next few chapters will shine some light on our protagonists. Until then, we'll just have to be a little patient. let's get back to the frog. So, Froggit appears to be symbolic of both the patient's soul as well as the game as a whole. Froggit and Final Froggit's text even reflects some of Chara's bad route dialogue. But we know Chara isn't a patient's soul, as seen on their coffin. On the contrary, they seem to be very impatient at times. And Chris and Frisk seem to have red souls as well. Does the cyan and red soul split in the Mad Mew Mew fight have any symbolic weight in the story, or is it just a reference to the standard Switch controller colors? Wait, control being split? Let's not get too far off track again. The patient's soul uses a knife, just like our protagonists do, and isn't that weird that there's two items that are that similar in the game? You could argue that it's sort of a bookend for the story. The first weapon you get is the same as the last one, but then why not have Frisk start with the toy knife? Honestly, I'm not sure the knife and ribbon even belong to the patient's soul, at least not at first. Where do we find the real knife? In Asgore's home, untouched and wrapped up with a pretty red bow. Since Asgore and Toriel's homes reflect each other, it would be easy to imagine the toy knife was wrapped up in the same way when Chara first arrived in the ruins, the place the Dreamer family lived before they moved to new home. It's possible the toy knife was meant for Chara as well, and the patient's soul found it later, not knowing the ribbon that they wore was originally for wrapping presents. But then there's the bandages in the patient's soul segment of the Flowey fight, which are an item that Frisk starts the game with. For some reason, the Cyan Soul uses similar items to both of Undertale's Red Souls. Judging from Toriel and Asgore's dialogue, it suggested that other humans besides Frisk may have had the ability to reset too, and so that may be another— what the heck did I write? And so that may be yet another parallel. But what's left to identify the patient's soul if the items aren't theirs? Maybe a desire to look cute to avoid pain? Or maybe a desire to look cute for someone you care about? Sky's Forever Blue. A beautiful music video created by Toby alongside several talented artists, and posted on Deltarune's anniversary in 2022. Despite the release date, it doesn't initially look Deltarune related, but fans have speculated about this world being similar to a video game in Deltarune called Dragon Blazers, namely because of the RPG-style dragon fight shown here. But that's not all. Other theorists like Half-Bred Chaos and, again, Jaru Jaru have come to the conclusion that the girl in the music video represents Death's Holiday. The main points for the idea are that this girl loses her pink and white ribbon with a similar animation to items lost when jumping into the Dark World, the ribbons being similar to the ones Noelle considers familiar and nostalgic in Deltarune, as well as the girl seemingly becoming trapped in darkness, like Des is potentially trapped in the files. The girl in the video may also have the ability to reset time, and appears to use the ability when the world crumbles beneath her and her love interest. Maybe Des had the ability to reset time before the player could, just like Flowey. But this scene, it's familiar to me. Those of you who know me only from YouTube might not know I've been working on an Undertale fan comic for the last 6 years or so. The early pages are a bit rough, so please have mercy. The Six Who Fell Before You is about the 6 humans who fell into the underground and died before Frisk did, hence my obsession with discussing the souls and their traits in this video. On page 14 of my comic, I drew this scene where the patient's soul pierced the ruin she was leaned against in a spur of emotion, and the old balcony crumbles away. Her love interest, the Bravery soul, reaches out to save her, but he doesn't make it in time. She falls, but before she reaches the ground, is able to use Chara's ability to reset time, and accompanies the Bravery soul for the rest of their adventure. It's just a happy coincidence, but it's what led me to connect the girl in the video to the patient's soul in the first place. Taking lyrics from the song itself, the most obvious evidence is having the word blue in the title itself seemingly a reference to the lyric in Earthbound's Pollyanna. But wait, the blue soul is integrity. The patient's soul is cyan, as seen with the flowers. While this is true, in Undertale, both blue attacks and cyan attacks are simply called blue. So cyan could be called blue in this instance as well. Other easy connections to this song and the patient's soul are themes of waiting another day and these things will take time. And one more piece of evidence I'd like to add is, ever since the day we met, a parcel of my mind's lost to you. The use of the word parcel here may be a specific choice. It can easily be swapped with portion, and the meaning remains unchanged. However, a parcel can also mean a package, usually wrapped and sent to someone as a present. Before the music video released, I wondered if the patient's soul having items of both Chara and Frisk meant that Chris could be represented by patients, and the red soul wasn't theirs, but the players as a replacement after whatever mysterious incident took place before the game. But Jaru analyzed the idea of Chris being connected to patients and pointed out the patient's soul's gulf dialogue. You waited still for an opportunity, then dethroned Ball with a sharp attack. This stealthy attack style doesn't match Chris's attack style so far, but we have heard of the fabled Holiday Family ninja style. And if the video is a reference to Dragon Blazers, Susie mentions that in Dragon Blazers 2, that the sister is cursed and that her stats suck. This could be referencing how the patient's items are arguably the worst in the game due to being early game items. Even the stick and bandage have hidden uses. I wonder if the Dreamer family is the ones being dethroned, since we don't have much royalty to go off of aside from... I have my suspicions about the boy in the music video too, even if there's less to go off of with him. If he's the girl's love interest, and the girl is Des, one of the only characters around Des's age that was mentioned to have interacted with her in a positive way via lending her his jacket is Asriel. This is supported by the lyrics. Two friends started out as neighbors, since Asriel and Des are both neighbors in Deltarune. The boy is also wearing a bandana, and Asriel appears to be athletic in Deltarune since he has a lot of trophies, and depending on which save file you're using, he'll have a cross-country shirt in his drawer. It's also worth noting that the bandana is a defense item of the Bravery soul in Undertale. A good reason to pair up the Patience and Bravery souls together is because Orange and Cyan attacks are seen together often in the game since they complement each other so well. Another strong point is Chris's will becoming Courage in Chapter 1, as well as the song Faint Courage playing when you get a game over. Chris may be remembering their brother in their times of need. The obvious issue with this comparison, however, is that in Undertale, both Des and Asriel are monsters. They can't have been a human soul in that universe, so any connection would have to be symbolic rather than literal. The souls are shown symbolically as flowers in Deltarune after all. There's also no toy knife or tough glove to be seen in the video, but a knife would make a good weapon to pierce the earth with and open a dark world, if that comes into play. But why would it matter if Des and Asriel represent these two souls or not? Going back to the first segment of this video, you'll realize what I'm leading to. Jevil and Spamton needed to be searched for off the beaten path in order to complete their fights. If we're going in reverse Flowey fight order with the secret bosses, an enemy representing the Patient's soul would be the last to fight. And how climactic of a fight would it be if the last secret boss was related to the girl we've been searching for all along? Then again, while the secret bosses can be connected to Undertale's offense items like the knife, stick, and gun, we have yet to see any great significance from the defense items, which would include both the ribbon and the bandana. That said, if the item locations in Undertale foreshadow Deltarune's characters in some way, things might not look good for Des and Asriel. The ribbon is found down a hole in the ground, and the glove is found in a box. Not to mention Integrity's items are found near water and plants, so I wonder if there'll be any relevance to the Song of the Sea, or the possible Dark World in Asgor's flower shop. I'm less sure about items sold in shops, but the bandana is sold in QC's shop. While in Deltarune, one of Chris's strongest memories with Asriel is from hanging out at QC's diner after church, which could be another point for the bandana Asriel theory. I wonder if this means Perseverance's items will have to do with Gerson, possibly setting Chapter 4 in the graveyard or the church. In Chapter 2, Alphys says there's no school tomorrow and Noelle's family is trying to go to church that day. That could mean that Chapter 3 is on a Saturday and Chapter 4 is on a Sunday, and the church holds service on both days if that's where Chapter 4 takes place. We even see Chris hanging out with Susie at QC's in the preview images for Chapter 4, just like they used to spend time after church with their brother. But if the defense items are so important, why haven't we seen any yet? I could give the locket and bandage a pass since the red soul typically represents the main character and is bound to be weird, but the cowboy hat should have been important to a Lightner in Chapter 2. So hear me out. In Undertale, Napstablook worked on a farm, right? And Mettaton used to live there too. All I'm saying is that if Deltarune Mettaton comes out of that house as a cowboy hat wearing ghost, I may just combust on the spot. But we haven't seen him yet, so I'll leave it be. Regardless if any of these theories end up having any weight to them or not, Patience is definitely one weird soul to keep an eye on. The amalgamate created from Final Froggit, Astigmatism, and Whimsalot. I think Reaper Bird will have symbolic importance in Deltarune based off of a few observations. The first observation is that Everyman shows up in Reaper Bird's attacks, and is found throughout both chapters 1 and 2 of Deltarune so far. I originally thought Everyman was a reference to something, and I've just never heard of it, but I wasn't able to find any trace of that online, so maybe it's just a fun reoccurring Easter egg then? At the very least, the art book describes Everyman as just a good guy who shows up on occasion. Another thing tying Reaper Bird to Deltarune is the text that appears when you check it after meeting its spare conditions. The relentless future looks brighter and brighter, which is the complete opposite of the typical spiel of darker yet darker. But once again, I'm choosing to focus on soul symbolism here. The trio that makes up the Reaper Bird can be encountered in the core if the player chooses the Warrior's Path. I've already talked about how I associate Stigmatism with Perseverance, Whimsung with Bravery, and final Froggit with Patience. But the 3 paths to get to the end of the core also reflect these 3 traits. The Sage's path is Perseverance, as Perseverance appears to be the most studious of the souls based off of their Gulf text, and this path has the player complete a puzzle. Both Bravery and Justice are good candidates for the Warrior path, but when someone thinks of a warrior, they're more likely to imagine someone who brawls with their fists rather than a sharpshooting cowboy. While the 3rd path is lesser known, it's the easiest to tie to Patience. All it requires is for the player to wait in this room until the laser turns off by itself. Going off this information, I'm led to believe that this trio of soul traits is important somehow. Gaster's already mentioned 2 of them so far in these tweets, but what makes these 3 traits so important? At first I guessed the monster trio represented Chris, Noelle, and Susie, but there were several problems with this. Namely that, despite not being purple, Birdly was a better candidate for Perseverance and Astigmatism than Susie, being a studious, glasses-wearing bully. Although I suppose Susie could be squinting from bad vision. Still, it's unlikely to be our main trio of Lightners, as cool of a tie-in it would have been to add to Printer Theory. But after the Skies Forever Blue video was released, we now have better candidates for characters the monster trio could be symbolic of. I've already talked about how Asriel and Des fit Bravery and Patience respectively, and Asriel is even hinted at being religious for Whimsung's Prey Act to fit. That just leaves Perseverance. I wonder if Susie has any siblings that wear glasses. If Asriel does end up being connected to Whimsung, however, the themes of ending one's own life, and the way Chris acts when characters bring him up, concerns me to say the least. If the Reaper Bird's yellow text at the end of Undertale's credits has any importance here, living with their families is reassuring at least. The bodies of the souls aren't in the basement anymore either, but who knows what happened to them. Even if Asgore, Toriel, or someone decided to put them to rest on the surface, no one mentions their absence. There's also the text, "What a Nightmare," from the trio's encounter. Nightmares, dreams, and sleep are all reoccurring themes in Deltarune. To give a few examples, Jevel mentions it, the Queen mentions Noelle's darker dream in the Weird Route, most characters initially think their time in the Dark World was a dream, and both chapters start with Chris waking up in their suspiciously achromatic bed and falling asleep at the chapter's end. Even in Undertale, Flowey describes how each time he used his reset power to go back in time, as if it were all a bad dream. Hopes and dreams come as a pair and are very prominent in Deltarune's prophecy, but the most notable pairing of these hopes and dreams is in Undertale, and serves heavily in Asriel's final boss fight. In this fight, there's an item that's almost as weird as the bad memory item, the last dream. When you dream, your inventory fills up with this consumable item. It heals you up by 17, despite the description saying it only heals 12, which I don't know if that's on purpose or not. Regardless, its ID number is 55, and wait, that's the same number that Noelle's HP dropped to in the Weird Route, and the same number that means LV in Roman numerals. It could easily just be another coincidence, right? But the description is that it's the goal of determination, and through determination, the dream comes true. If this is on purpose, this could be a reference to a determined person dreaming about gaining LV. But why would we want to gain LV? Here comes everyone's favorite charity man. When Spamton makes Chris a deal of Hyperlink blocked, Chris seems to understand what Spamton is offering here, and Spamton begins to taunt them about it. Despite backing away from Spamton in fear, Chris does what he asks and tells Susie and Rouse not to follow them while making their deals. We don't make Chris go by themselves, they choose to. It must have been a really tempting offer. There's plenty of speculation about what hyperlink blocked is, and I find that the answer that makes the most sense is LV, or love. Other popular choices I saw online were choices, freedom, and agency, but none of them worked in every instance where Spamton mentions hyperlinked blocked. The biggest hint for hyperlinked blocked being love is, unfortunately, to make a crude joke in the weird route. Whether Chris doesn't kill enemies by choice, or because they simply can't, they are completely unable to earn LV in our battles without making someone like Noelle earn it in their place. Maybe their last dream is to use love to regain control over their life? After all, when Spamton transfers his hyperlinked block to the disc, his shop becomes desolate and achromatic, again, like Chris's bed. But LV might not be what Chris really needs to regain control. Remember, in Undertale, love isn't the player's power level, it's how much you distance yourself to inflict more hurt onto others. The imagined strength gained from it is psychological rather than physical, and in Undertale's bad end, the LV we've earned is used to erase the world whether the player wants to or not. Sure, the player loses control, but the price is the erasure of the world. Spamton makes a point in the weird route when he says, "It's better to be dead than free." Thematic secret bosses, lost souls, an unquenchable thirst for freedom. Whatever happens in the following chapters, we may need to be very, very careful. As much as I'd love to wrap all this in a pretty red bow, I just smashed like all of my Deltarune theories into one video. Chances are some of this is gonna get debunked fairly soon, but hey, it's not about solving some grand puzzle or saying I was right all along. It's about appreciating potential foreshadowing that the creator may or may not have left to create such a compelling story. I'm already blown away by the level of planning it took to make what we have so far. For these reasons, I try to keep my imagination from flying off the handle. Cause Sans totally has a body buried here. I just can't prove it yet. I'm onto you, Sans Undertale Deltarune skeleton. I know you took that silverware from the other table instead of reserving it yourself, you absolute menace to all society! Please check out the other theorist I mentioned in this video. I wouldn't have gotten this far if it hadn't been for all the research they've done before me, and I had a lot of fun brushing up on the absolute truckload of lore these games have to offer. Thanks for watching up to this point. As always, please let me know what you think in the comments below. I've got a few ideas for other Deltarune videos, other than just theory making, and I'm excited to get started on them, but you know, these things will take time.